All right. It's loading up here. Give it just a couple of seconds. And hello and welcome everyone to the LA WhipCon 2021 virtual competition live something. It's an interview and discussion. And I'm joined today, as you can see, with Justin Boreski. Thank you for joining us, sir.
No problem. My pleasure.
And the competition itself is, of course, as everyone that has seen us probably knows, it's a whip competition. You can do lots of different cracking, lots of different fun things to do. And this year we're submitting videos, and everyone's competing against each other. But the in-person one was lots of camaraderie, talking about the enjoyment of the competition itself. And I'm hoping that some of these interviews, like our conversation that we're about to have right now, we can get a little bit of that, and hopefully other people watching can enjoy as well. So without further ado, once again, my name is Christian Pasenzik, and Justin, it is nice to meet you. And I want to ask you a few basic questions I have here, and we can just have a conversation about whips and whip cracking.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so how long have you been cracking whips?
It's been 12 or 13 years. I started when I was just a little kid. My dad, so my great-great-grandfather lived in Hungary, and he herded cattle with the whip as his tradition there, and so it got passed down to me. And then I remember being like, I say I started at like 12 because that's when I could crack the whip on my own, but I remember being 5 or 6 and my dad just holding my hand and me kind of ragdolling and him making the whip crack with my hand there, you know.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it's kind of been my whole life in a way.
What kind of whips did you use? Were they
so
kind of
that
like
was a Hungarian whip, like the Hungarian Astor. So it's like a wooden handle, about 12 inches, and then it has all that cool like leather frills and fancy stuff. And then there's like a loop that attaches the handle to the thong. And so it acts a little bit differently than most whips that you'd use because of that like big loop, and also it was big and heavy. I think it was like 7 feet, and over like years and years of use and abuse, this thing we kept making modifications to it because it would fall apart and then come back and so on. And so I used that until I got a nylon bullwhip like a few years later, and I could actually do stuff that was difficult, you know.
That's awesome. I've never used that type of a whip before. I've seen them though. It looks like a weird combination of like a cow whip and a stock whip, and yet the girth of like a good heavy bull whip. And yeah, it's a neat combination.
It's interesting, and the way that they move is sort of, it's just different, and you can kind of get different cracks in a way. Like it's a lot easier to, in my opinion, to get flicks because they're so heavy, but also there's this weird, because the handle and there's the loop and then the thong, there's this weird kind of like pause when you pull. I don't know. They're super cool. They're super cool, but definitely not volleyable.
Oh, right. And not that 7 foot would be very valuable anyway.
Yeah.
No, that's super cool. That's great. Did you make one? Have you made a whip since then, or did you make one like that?
I've never made a Hungarian style whip. I bought one, a new one, because the old one just fell apart. I've thought about making one or trying my hand at making like a nylon version, but I just haven't got around to it yet.
Oh, very cool. I make them myself, and it's a lot of fun. But yeah, it's really neat. This WhipCon is really a celebration of the cracking itself. I know previous competitions they had makers there, and there was judging on whip making as well, and some amazing whips were displayed over the previous years. But yeah, do you have any favorite whips currently that you really enjoy?
So a lot of people have they have different whips for different tricks kind of things, or like they want to do like a fast musical routine, they have a short set or whatever. And I have a set of 5.5 Whip-A-Lace stock whips by Simon Martin, and I just don't use anything else. I have tons of whips, and I'll take them out for like a day, and I'm like, well, that was nice, but I prefer, my Simon Martins, and I use them for everything, even things that I shouldn't use them for, I use them for. So it's like, oh yeah, the Flandy Hoofbeats, you're supposed to use 4-foot whips for that because it's fast and sounds like a horse. Nah, don't want to. Gonna use my 5.5, and it's just a really slow horse, like I love them so much. And so yeah, they've I've got them 2 years ago when I went to Australia, and I've just used them since. And they're
That's
awesome.
that's really cool. That's really cool.
Mhm.
Yeah, I know a lot of people enjoy the Whipple-Ace
Yeah.
whips. Yeah, but so I mean that kind of comes back to, I mean, with this WhipCon, that you could be exposed to lots of different types of whips.
Mhm.
And I know people have mentioned that the first time they got to try a fill in the blank whip from either a whip maker or a whip style. Um, what is it that you think is maybe positives and negatives about doing the WhipCon this way this year?
So I think like one of the things that I really like about this format is it's just more accessible for everyone. Um, Now, like I don't even know how many countries have participated, but it's at least like 12 or something, right? Like
Oh
people
yeah,
from
there was
all
a
over the
post.
world, that's really awesome, and I think that um, I mean it's just like it gives us an opportunity to see way more whip cracking than we ever have before, and different styles of whip cracking, because obviously people in Europe or something are going to have a different style than we do and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
So that's really awesome. And I think also it's really pushed people to do their best. Not that they didn't before, but now that there's this 1 minute video rather than a 1 minute freestyle at the competition,
Mhm.
I imagine people are taking like 50 or 60 takes to get that really nice video
I
and
know I
putting the
did.
routine together. Yeah.
Yeah,
So like that's really cool, and in a way it just allows us to see people at their absolute best. Like, and
yeah,
for me, I was very excited at the idea, like I'm gonna do everything I can, and then at the end of this, I have a 1 minute video, and it's like this is hopefully the best 1 minute of whip
right,
cracking I've ever done. So that I
right.
really really like. The only like real negatives for me are not getting to see everybody, and like you said, try their whips, have those conversations, and so I appreciate you doing this because it's going to help us do that a little bit.
Right. Yep.
And
Goal.
also, like I mean, being in Canada, just the opportunity to go somewhere warm in the winter and have a reason to is like, oh, cool. And now I don't have that,
Right.
so yeah,
Yeah. In Texas down here, our winter is kind of it's more like winter.
yeah,
So
yeah, exactly, yeah, yeah,
but yeah, that's cool. And I have a lot of the same feeling with the positives and negatives.
hmm
And yeah, a chance to go to California is always, I'll find a good excuse for that, right?
yeah, totally,
Um, I mean, also, I think this year, particularly, this format is important. I mean, with the pandemic and the quarantine,
mm,
everybody's cooped up. And well, we all joke about, I know a good way to stay 6 feet
yeah,
away from everybody, right?
yeah,
Yeah, whips, I mean, right?
uh-huh.
But yeah, it's hard on us too. I mean, just because we're 6 feet away doesn't mean we want to be. It would be nice to be 7 feet away from some other whip crackers at least, right?
Yeah,
And hang out and just see what you guys are up to. And I think, and once again, thank you for joining. And
yeah.
this is not that I'm running you off yet, but that's why this is important.
Mhm.
Um, so you were talking about how, hopefully this 1 minute video is going to be the one, your best 1 minute that you can do
Yeah,
that you've ever done.
right.
Um, how did you go about putting that together? Did like your routine
Uh,
itself? What cracks to pick and
so I based on um, I guess like say let's say like traditional Australian style competition rules.
Mhm.
Okay, I know that if I was in a competition like that, I would just get stomped. Like I'm not super good at the four corners, for example, and that intricate cracking. And really, what makes me excited is throws and weird moves where the whip is like wrapping around you and unwrapping and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know how this competition is being judged in that regard, but it's like that kind of wacky throwy stuff is what I'm best at, and B, it's what I enjoy, and I think it's kind of iconic to my style. And so when I was putting my routines together, I was thinking, okay, how can I incorporate me into this routine? Like I want to go out and do tricks that maybe I've created, or just like ideas that I've been working on, or other people's moves that I think are really awesome. Because if it's 1 minute of my best whip cracking, I want it to be 1 minute of my most talented whip cracking, but also 1 minute of like the whip cracks and tricks that I just think are the best.
sure.
And so that was kind of what I thought going into it. And so I made a list of for the one-handed and the two-handed, what tricks are like that? What tricks really get me excited about whip cracking, and what things are mine that I'm excited about? And then I kind of put those down on a piece of paper, and then from there it's just filling in the blanks and organizing them in a way that makes sense.
That's kind of where,
and that kind of, go on.
I don't mean to stop you. I was
No.
just curious if you could expound on that, on the organizing part a little bit. For me personally, just for my education, when I was working on my routine, I would have something that in my head it makes sense, and maybe it's just lack of experience. But going from, changing planes isn't always the smoothest transition when you're doing one to the next. So we need to have something that helps with that transition so it's cleaner.
Yep.
Or even if it's just switching to a volley and then doing the Tasmanian cutback, for example. But did you find anything to where you had to switch something around that way, or did you have a special filler move that you personally like to use in between? Or
so for me, I'll write down my moves, and I'll look at sort of like what is the easiest, or what are the ways that I can get into this move. So for example, with the Tasmanian cutback, I could do an overhead crack, I could do a cattleman's crack to the side, I could do a fast figure eight, and so on. And so if I know I'm adding in the Tasmanian cutback, I'm thinking, okay, which of those planes and directions is the end of another move that I'm doing? And so that's kind of how I try and structure the routine. But at a certain point, other things come into play. Like for my two-handed routine, I ended with some staggered volleys, which I wanted to do. And I started, after my required cracks, I started with the double arrowhead, which is a move that I really like and I spent all year on. And both of those moves happen in the same place, and arguably kind of in the same plane. It's just the arrowhead changes. And the reason I put the staggered volleys at the end rather than at the beginning is just because they're easier and I'm less likely to mess up on them. And so there's that kind of thing too, because as we said, like you're doing 50, 60, 100 takes. I'm tired, and it's unlikely take 99 if the hardest move is at the end. I'm just not gonna nail it. It's not gonna happen. So I kind of what I thought about too.
Well, that helps a lot, actually, and that makes me feel not quite so alone for my last few weeks of cramping forearms and stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Is there anybody that you've seen their routines that you're impressed by or surprised by? I mean, or learn something from even?
I don't know. I love whip cracking so much that everybody's routine is like, oh, that was so cool. Like, good for them, But I think Tori's routine, Torrance Fisher, his single hand was super cool because he's sneaky. He just throws in like a little crack here that you've never thought of before. Like he did a reverse body wrap and then unwrapped it and got a crack off of it. And it was extra sneaky because Tori, Kit, and I, and sometimes Todd, we've been having these group chats every week about whip cracking and what moves we're working on and stuff. Yeah, and he's just never mentioned it, not once. And then he puts out his routine and he's just like, oh, well, boop. And I'm like, really? Like, why didn't you tell us this was a thing?
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that was really cool. And I'm trying to think of some other folks. I mean, Todd's just came out. That was super awesome. And also, I was really happy to see a lot of people that just got started this year participating, because it's just cool to see beginners and how far they've progressed and all that kind of stuff. So like Emily Quant, and I mean, Karina has been doing this for a long time, but it was really cool seeing her routine too. Like it was just awesome seeing, I guess, how good our community is collectively, and just kind of like being hit with it over and over, like, oh, this person has a routine, gotta watch it. This person has a routine, gotta watch it, Exactly.
And the last couple of days, a bunch of them have been just appearing on pick a social media platform, Instagram and TikTok and everything. Yeah, just all over. It's really cool. And I think one, like you said earlier, just to go back about how with Australian competitions, there's certain types of moves that are scored better. So people kind of focus on those. Tosses and releases are not something that I don't think there's any value to those. I don't know for certain. I'm not super familiar with their scoring. I've just heard that is not a thing over there. So I don't know if you call tossing American style or just not Australian, but regardless, it's really fun to see this other style of people really getting good at something that is different. It's its own distinct little section of whip cracking. And not that I enjoy the other one any less. I mean, it's amazing. And I'm stunned when I see, especially some like Ben Hughes. I love watching his videos.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
fall out of my chair at the end of every routine. I'm like, ow, what? There had to be more than 2 whips in that video. Too many
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, those are really amazing. But it's a very different style than what Todd Rex does.
Mhm.
I don't expect to see Ben Hughes roll across the ground.
No.
But I would be surprised to see Todd Rex not roll across the ground,
Yeah.
right? Or do a backflip or something. And it's just so wonderful.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm talking and not interviewing.
No,
But
it's all good. I actually also off of that, I think from my understanding, the reason that the Australians don't do a lot of throws is because, like you said, it's very competitive, and they have certain things that are scored super well. And if you drop a whip in a routine, like your points are just dead, right? And they just don't want that to happen. So I think it's a lot easier to be consistent with. I mean, it's not easier for me to be consistent with the staggered 4 corners, but for them it is, because you're never releasing the whip, right? And there are some Australian routines like Wilkes Wonder or the Launceston Special where the whip
like
is
around the neck.
released. Exactly, yeah. And so those are scored fairly well, to my understanding, just because they're risky, and to do them confidently in competition is like, kind of ballsy. But I think that this format is really good for showcasing kind of what can be done and adding in throws and things, because again, as we said, you can do 60 takes. So if you drop 59 times, like that's fine,
Right.
because you get to put out this. Like I said, when I watched Todd's video at the end of his double thing, he starts with his classic, like or maybe it was a single whip. It was a single whip. He does a crack and a somersault and then catches the whip and then keeps going. And at the end of the routine, he does the same damn thing. And it's just like, man, you have, after like 55 seconds of hard cracking and you've nailed everything, you have to be so scared before that final somersault throw, because it's like, if I miss this, it's all pointless.
Blind catch.
Yeah.
And it's just there. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I mean, I'm really hoping that this kind of goes into the next question. I mean, that is where the future of this sort of meetup, this sort of competition is going to go. And then we will continue to build this community.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you want out of something like this competition or these sort of meetups? Where do you see, I guess, predict the future? Okay. and then wish for the future. What do you think?
So I'm not a super competitive person, and the reason that I got into whipcracking isn't for competition. Not that, like, I'm not knocking it. I think it's awesome. I think it's worthwhile, and it pushes people to be the best, but it's not really like what gets me up in the morning, I guess. And my favorite part of WhipCon was like just standing with someone and idea sharing and teaching each other stuff. And I remember at last year's WhipCon, Leah Orleans was there, and she was doing some stuff, and I'd never chatted with her before, and I said, oh, that kind of looks like some of the stuff that I do. So like, I'm going to go over there and like show her some of my stuff. And good God, man, she just showed me tons of stuff that I'd never even thought of. I didn't even have a chance. It was just like, oh, and you can do this, and you can wrap the foot. And I was just there, like, loving it. Like, she's a genius, you know? And so I love that, and I'd love to see that more in the future. Like, I know that on the last day, there's workshops, right? Like Todd does a throwing workshop, and Adam's done a Queensland crossover one or 4 corners one. But I would love to.
Peter did a making video or a workshop too last year.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and so I'd love to do a convention that's like that. It's just like anyone that wants to can run any workshop they want to, and it's just people like learning and idea sharing, and maybe instead of a competition or like alongside a competition, there's also a showcase, and that's just people showing off. This is what I do. This is what I like to do. We're not competing. We're just like, Aaron's going to get up there and juggle 4 whips like a monster. Todd's going to go up there and throw his whips around like a monster. Danny Shaw is going to do his 4 corners. I'm going to go up and drop stuff and hit myself in the face. And it's just going to be a good time. Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of, I guess, because I have some experience in the flow arts world. Like that's what flow arts festivals are like. That's kind of what I want for whips. Because I just like that idea sharing friendly. We're learning a lot. And then alongside that, I'm sure we could have
Sure.
competitions of some sort too.
I think it's really neat how so many people are donating the prizes too, which we got to have a reason to give out prizes. I mean, you can
Yeah.
do just raffles, of course, which maybe more raffles might be a thought for the future. We can talk to Adam about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, having these to attract these big names also is really cool. Like, I mean, that's why I think it's worth some of these guys' time to work on a routine and show us just amazing what is their best, because they know there's a good chance that they could get $1,000 whip out of the deal.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
That's really, really awesome. Well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this chat, and I'm hoping that anyone else watching or watches this later, hit me up if you just want to talk about whips and whip stuff, and let's make this or talk to Justin. I mean, too. You can
All
do
of
that too.
us,
It's
yeah.
not just me. I mean, let's all chat and talk about this and have a just a community about this. It doesn't have to be a formal thing. I'm not with NBC, and I mean, I've got my microphone, but but yeah. So thank you very much once again, and I guess I'll see you on the Facebook page.
Yeah, let's do
All
it.
right.
Thanks so
Thank
much. I appreciate it.
you.
Ciao.
Have a good day.
Yeah.
All right. That was awesome.
Yeah, what was?